Christmas Nisse. Chapter 1. The Sneeze. It was just before 7 when Bruno got out of bed, put on his dressing gown and slippers, and carefully opened his bedroom door. He made his way along the landing when... creak! A loud sound came from the floorboard beneath his foot. Bruno stood completely still and held his breath. He had to be totally quiet. He couldn't wake her up before he completed his mission. A few steps later, he reached the door and opened it very slowly. Bruno crept into the room and lightly tiptoed over to the bed. She was still asleep. Her arm was hanging temptingly down over the side of the bed, so he took his chance. "Pinch punch, first of the month and no returns!" he called out as he gave her arm a quick nip and a gentle thump with his fist. "Morning, Mum!" Bruno greeted her to a new day. Oh, Mrs. Watson opened her eyes sluggishly. "Oh, good morning, Bruno," she croaked. "Oh, that's 5-2 to me," Bruno announced proudly. "And it's extra special because it's December now." He checked his spy watch that his father had given him for his birthday last year. It's been December in England for exactly 6 hours and... He paused as he waited for the seconds to kick in. 54 minutes! Oh, that means it's just 24 more sleeps now until present day! Present day? Oh, Bruno, you mean until Christmas Day, sighed Mrs. Watson. It's not just about presents, you know that. There's a lot more to Christmas. Besides, I'm not sure we'll be able to make such a big fuss of it this year. Money's very tight at the moment. "But getting presents is obviously the best bit. Everyone knows that," insisted Bruno. "And the snow, that's cool too. Do you think it'll snow this year? It hasn't snowed at Christmas time for ages." I wonder if I'll get a big present from Dad again. Remember, Mum, the huge telly he got me last year?" "How could I forget?" Mrs. Watson said with a weary smile. "At least it keeps you out of my hair when I'm busy." "You're always busy," Bruno muttered quietly so she wouldn't hear. "I wonder what he'll get me this year. Something big, I hope." "Bruno," Mrs. Watson said, changing the subject quickly, "how about you get me a nice glass of juice and bring it up to me? Help me to wake up." Bruno agreed, though he didn't see why she couldn't get one for herself. He trudged down the stairs and into the kitchen, trying to decide what he most wanted for Christmas. He got out a carton of juice from the fridge and poured a glass for his mum and one for himself. Just as he picked up his mum's glass, he heard what sounded like a sneeze. It made him jump, which then made him spill some of the drink down his pyjamas. He looked around. They didn't have any pets, and there wasn't anyone else in the house apart from Bruno and his mum. Where could the noise have come from? He looked all around the kitchen but couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. I wonder what it was, Bruno thought to himself as he peered around the room. He realised there couldn't be anyone else in the kitchen and decided he must have been hearing things, so he took the drink up to his mum, who noticed the spillage straight away. "Sorry, Mum, I didn't mean to." "No, you never mean to, do you?" Mrs. Watson looked at him for a moment. "Ah, never mind. I was going to do some washing today anyway." Bruno huffed. It wasn't his fault he'd spilt the drink. He'd been startled by the noise. He felt like his mum was always quick to point out what he'd done wrong, but wasn't so good at praising him when he did something well. But he also knew that his mum was having a tricky time at the moment. He went into his bedroom, got out of his pyjamas, and slipped on a clean white t-shirt and a pair of jeans. Weekends had been much better when his dad was around. They would play football in the park or go exploring in the woods, but now Bruno and his mum usually just went shopping, and then she would have loads of chores to do round the house, so he was left on his own. At least he had the telly to watch. He remembered how excited he'd been when he opened the massive parcel last Christmas. His dad had even come to deliver it on Christmas Day. Oh, he could only stay for an hour, but at least he'd been to see them. He loved his telly, but what he wanted more than anything was a real adventure, not something on a TV screen. He went back down to the kitchen to get his drink. As he took a gulp, he heard another sneeze. And once again spilt juice all down his previously clean white T-shirt. "Oh no!" cried Bruno. Bruno definitely heard a muffled sneeze this time. He looked around the kitchen, but saw nothing that could have made a sneezing sound. "Anyone there?" he said softly. "Sounds like you've got a bit of a nasty cold, whoever you are." At that moment, his mum walked in. They needed to have breakfast and get ready for the day. Finding out what the mysterious sound was would have to wait.